On a snowy winter night, a scream pierces the silence. A witness swears he saw a snowman come to life. The snowman lunged at the victim with a bayonet, then vanished without a trace in the swirling snow. When the police arrived, the snow held only two sets of footprints, the victim's and the witness's. No third person. No walking snowman. Was the witness the killer? He was found guilty and went to the gallows. But years later, a stranger shows up at the door and calmly says, "I did it." And the truth is far simpler, and far more twisted, than you ever imagined. Welcome to Paul Halter's The Abominable Snowman. A tale of impossible crime that sent an innocent man to the scaffold, and hid its true secret behind one of the most ingenious tricks mystery fiction has ever seen. Alright, hello everyone. Today I'll be sharing a story called The Abominable Snowman, from the short story collection The Night of the Wolf by French author Paul Halter. Without further ado, let's get started. On a snowy, bitterly cold Christmas Eve, the detective Owen was on his way to a friend's gathering. Due to the identical row houses in the area, completely covered in snow, he got lost. It felt like he was trapped in a maze. He wandered the streets for over an hour, but still couldn't find his friend's place. Just as he was about to give up and head home, he noticed two paramedics walking out of a nearby street, carrying a stretcher onto an ambulance. Around that time, the nearby church bells rang out for 11 p.m. The person on the stretcher appeared to be a man. Curious, Owen approached a police officer to ask what had happened. The officer gestured toward the street and said that a man, who didn't look like a vagrant, had been found collapsed against a wall. By the time they arrived, the man had already passed away. The cause of death was unclear for now. After the officer and the ambulance left, Owen walked deeper into the street. It ended in a dead end. He struck a match to illuminate the house number of the last building. Unfortunately, it still wasn't his friend's house. Just then, a voice emerged from the darkness. "Good evening, sir. Are you looking for someone?" The sudden presence startled Owen. There had been no one around moments ago. "Yes, I'm looking for a friend of mine. By the way, did you know the man who was just taken away from here?" The stranger seemed surprised by the question. He said he had been standing there for about 5 minutes, but hadn't seen anyone being carried out. Owen was puzzled. "Could I have been mistaken?" "Maybe I was wrong," Owen said. "I couldn't even find my friend's place. It should be at the end of the next street. That house at the end of the next street used to belong to the Wilsons. But they weren't home that night 10 years ago." Owen didn't understand the reference. "What does that have to do with the Wilsons?" The stranger continued. 10 years ago, right there, a body was indeed carried out by paramedics, just as you described. It was a tragedy. A man was brutally killed against the wall. And it was also an unsolved mystery. Owen paused, momentarily entertaining the idea that he had somehow glimpsed a scene from 10 years prior. But curiosity about the mystery quickly overtook his confusion. Abandoning the search for his friend's house, he urged the stranger to tell him what had happened back then. The story began with the house in front of them. 10 years earlier, the Gray family lived there. The Grays had two sons, Fred and Hugh, and a daughter named Jessica. In 1914, both brothers fell in love with a girl named Maud. Shortly after the war began, Maud married the younger brother, Hugh. The three Gray men all went off to fight. Tragically, only the elder brother, Fred, returned after the war. Later, Maud, now a widow, married Fred. Maud also had a brother named Jerry, who had served in the war. The first strange occurrence happened a month before Christmas. Fred's sister, Jessica, built a large snowman at the end of the street and dressed it in their late brother Hugh's armor jacket and bayonet. The bizarre snowman looked harmless during the day, but seemed menacing and threatening at night. It was unsettling, reminiscent of the eerie doll in the crooked house. The family, of course, disliked it. One night, Maud reportedly came home and felt as though the snowman was moving. She had nightmares that night, dreaming that Hugh, holding a rifle with a bayonet, approached her, whispering about revenge. 3 days before Christmas, Maud, Fred, Jerry, and a doctor friend attended a party. At the gathering, they ran into a man named Peterson, a former comrade of the Grey brothers. Peterson also took a liking to the beautiful Maud. Fred chatted with his old war buddy, even joking about his eccentric clothing and shoes. However, toward the end of the night, a drunken Peterson made a comment that left everyone uneasy. He had heard that it wasn't an enemy bullet that killed Hugh on the battlefield. The implication was clear: Fred had killed his own brother to reclaim the woman he loved. Word eventually reached Fred. Perhaps to clear his name, he invited Peterson to visit on Christmas Eve. That evening, around 9 p.m., a fuse blew in the Grey household, plunging the house into darkness. Unable to find a spare fuse and with night already fallen, they decided to light some candles and deal with it the next day. At 10:15 p.m., Fred's mother was in the kitchen when she heard Peterson ring the doorbell. Jerry answered the door. As soon as Peterson entered, he was drawn to an oil painting at the end of the hallway, a portrait of a woman who looked strikingly like Maud. Fred was not downstairs at the time, so Jerry told Peterson to wait in the drawing room while he went upstairs to fetch him. According to Peterson, he stayed in the drawing room, listening to music from a music box, until screams erupted outside. He rushed to the window and was horrified to see Fred under attack by a stranger, but the assailant was none other than the snowman. The snowman was stabbing Fred repeatedly with a bayonet. Unable to believe his eyes, Peterson sprinted outside and ran to Fred's side. But the snowman stood motionless, as if nothing had happened. Jerry appeared at a second-floor window, asking Peterson what had happened. After hearing the absurd claim that the snowman had attacked Fred, Jerry was skeptical, but the sight of Fred lying in a pool of blood was undeniable. Jerry instructed Peterson to go find the police. According to the doctor friend, he had been reading the newspaper in the dining room when he heard footsteps rushing through the hallway, then the commotion outside. Through the window, he saw a figure dash past. Realizing something was wrong, he stepped out and ran into Jerry, who had just come downstairs. Fred's mother and Maud also recalled hearing the disturbance and the hurried footsteps in the corridor. They all gathered at the front door as the doctor went to examine the body. The police arrived at 10:50 p.m. Everyone noted that Peterson had acted quickly without wasting time, though he later expressed frustration that his trip to find help seemed to have taken far too long. The investigation confirmed Fred's time of death and found that the murder weapon was the bayonet from the snowman. The snow had stopped earlier that evening, leaving only the footprints of the doctor and those of the victim and the first witness, Peterson. All of this seemed to corroborate Peterson's account. But it also made him the prime suspect, as he had been the first to reach the body. Although Peterson insisted he had seen the snowman kill Fred, the police dismissed his claim as a delusion. They believed Peterson, fueled by either jealousy over Maud or revenge for Hugh, had committed the murder and concocted a fanciful story to cover his tracks. Adding to the case against him, Peterson claimed to have arrived at 9:55 p.m., while the family insisted it was 10:15 p.m. Ultimately, Peterson was convicted of murder and executed. The stranger rubbed his hands together and exhaled a cloud of breath before continuing. He noted one other detail. A vase in the drawing room had been knocked over and shattered. Peterson said he had accidentally knocked it over in his panic. However, when the pieces were reassembled, one fragment was missing. It was never found in the house. The stranger concluded that he firmly believed Peterson was innocent. If he had been guilty, why invent such an unbelievable story? But given the lack of evidence of anyone else at the scene, who had killed Fred? Could it have been Hugh's ghost, possessing the snowman to avenge his death? The stranger looked at Owen with a hint of provocation. Owen cleared his throat and said his signature phrase, "Everything has an explanation. I think you already know the truth about this mystery. You've given me every piece of information I need. You've clearly summarized everything: the Wilsons' absence, the blown fuse, the shattered vase, the painting, the music box, Peterson's new shoes. You didn't miss a single detail. Obviously, you know the whole story because you were part of it. You're Maud's brother, Jerry. Am I right?" The stranger smiled but said nothing. "Who I am doesn't matter," he said. "The question is, how do you solve this mystery?" Owen continued. "The key is the missing fragment. I already know where it was left behind, right on the floor of the drawing room. But not at the Greys' house, it was in the Wilsons' house next door." The man's expression shifted to one of surprise. "You're quite the little genius," he said. Owen pressed on. 10 years ago, you staged an elaborate performance that deceived Peterson and misled everyone. Earlier, I got lost because of how identical these houses are, and you exploited that to craft a brilliant deception. At first, the plan was Fred's idea. He wanted to make Peterson look like a fool in front of the police, ensuring no one would take his rumors seriously. But when you learned of the plan, you saw an opportunity to eliminate Fred. You couldn't let your sister marry a man who had betrayed his own brother. Perhaps the Wilsons were close friends of your parents and had entrusted you with their house key before leaving. That gave you access to their home. Here's how the trick worked. Peterson did arrive at 9:55 p.m., but not at the Greys' house. He went to the Wilsons' house instead. You prepared by placing the painting, the vase, and the music box inside to draw his attention. Outside, you also built an identical snowman. To ensure Peterson wouldn't notice the differences between the two houses, you deliberately blew a fuse at the Greys' house, making it dark so he couldn't compare the interiors. On the night in question, you welcomed Peterson into the Wilsons' house and led him to a drawing room identical to the one next door. While he waited, Fred went outside to stage the scene, coating himself and the snowman's bayonet with red paint. Then he pretended to struggle with the snowman before falling to the ground. Under the cover of night, with Fred's convincing performance, Peterson was fooled. He rushed to help, and you called from the second-floor window, urging him to fetch the police. Once Peterson was gone, you and Fred quickly dismantled the snowman and retrieved the painting and music box. But in your haste, you missed a fragment of the broken vase, leaving it behind in the Wilsons' house. Then came the second act. You returned home, restored the painting, scattered the vase pieces back onto the floor, and started the music box again. At 10:15 p.m., Fred, disguised with a beard and glasses, rang the doorbell. From the kitchen, your mother couldn't see clearly and assumed it was Peterson. You then pretended to escort him to the drawing room, but instead, you led him outside under the pretense of needing to reapply the paint to the bayonet. After that, you changed into shoes identical to Peterson's and ran out. By then, the others in the house believed the hurried footsteps belonged to Peterson. You killed Fred with the bayonet, then quickly put on the beard and glasses he had worn. When the doctor came to the window, you ran past, making him think Peterson had gone for help. Then you slipped back inside and pretended to come downstairs, just as the doctor entered the hallway. Meanwhile, the real Peterson was returning with the police, who knew the Greys' address. To him, everything looked the same: the snowman, the footprints, Fred's body in the snow. He never suspected he had been at the wrong house. That explains the discrepancy in time. Peterson felt his trip had taken much longer, because he had indeed left at 10 o'clock and returned at 10:50. To the Grey family, Peterson left at 10:20, so the timing seemed inconsistent. Naturally, the police trusted the majority. When Owen finished his deduction, Jerry was stunned. He admitted that he had killed Fred and framed an innocent man. Over the years, his health had declined, and the weight of his guilt had become unbearable. He had wanted to confess, but never found the courage. Now that someone knew the truth, he said he could finally find peace. Jerry asked Owen to leave him alone in the darkness, at the end of the street. The next afternoon, Owen read a newspaper report about an unidentified man found dead at the end of a certain street, the same place they had met. But one detail unsettled him. He hurried to the police station and learned that Jerry's body had been discovered at 11 p.m., not at midnight. This story left a deep impression on me, not just because of the moving snowman, but because of that final detail about the time of death. It gave the story an eerie, almost supernatural twist, blending mystery with gothic horror. As one reader put it, remove the beginning and the end, and this is a detective story. Leave them, and it becomes gothic fiction with a hint of mystery. The rest of the stories in Paul Halter's The Night of the Wolf are equally bizarre and fascinating. I highly recommend reading the original.